President Biden will give his first State of the Union address tonight. And given Russia's brutal assault on Ukraine, Vladimir Putin is raising concerns of nuclear war and severe economic pain here in the United States. This shapes up as the most consequential speech of the president's career. It also presents an opportunity to unite the country. Here's White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki on what we can expect.
He will definitely spend time in the speech talking about the conflict in Ukraine, his efforts to rally the world, to lead the world in responding to and standing up to autocratic leadership. What people will also hear from him for a great deal of the speech is his plan, not only the progress we've made a lot of economic progress, but his commitment to addressing prices, addressing costs, addressing inflation.
He's got a lot to do, Joey Jones. And you know that infamous line from Gerald Ford, the State of the Union is not good. Every State of the Union, I think about what word fits best in that blank. The State of the Union is X, Y, or Z. And the optimal word that comes to mind with President Biden is crises. That seems to be the state of our union.
Absolutely. I hope that the president takes the stage tonight, not with his polls in mind, not with the midterms in mind, perhaps not even with the outcome of this war in mind, but with the prosperity of our country in mind. I hope that the president takes the stage tonight and delivers a message that tells Americans they've been heard, whether he agrees with them or not, that the moms at school boards, that the Ukrainian Americans, that the Americans living on the south border, that Americans that are struggling with issues that he may not agree with the solution that they propose, that he hears them and that he knows what they're going through. That goes a long way. We talk about unity. Unity is not going to happen around a solution. Unity is going to happen around acknowledging the problem, and that's where our president needs to start. I don't expect it, and I hate to be that way. It's true, but that's what we need, and that's what we deserve.
Very wise words, and underscoring that point, Joey, was David Axelrod, longtime Obama advisor, back on February 14th, so before the Russia invasion began. He gave some advice to President Biden in this New York Times essay. It's called Mr. President, It's Time for a Little Humility. And in part, here's what it says. The State of the Union is stressed to claim otherwise, to highlight the progress we have made without fully acknowledging the hard road we have traveled and the distance we need to go would seem off-key and out of touch. You simply cannot jawbone Americans into believing that things are better than they feel. This advice is apparently circulated among top Biden allies, Emily, but it's unclear whether senior officials in the White House are listening to that advice or agree with Axelrod. I certainly do.
That's right. And Niall Ferguson actually laid it out perfectly, because he pointed out after Carter's disastrous State of the Union address, Reagan was surgical in response. Remember, I find no national malaise. I find nothing wrong with the American people. And the reason that resonated with voters was because there really was a clear causal link between the foreign policy failures and inflation and feeling it in your home. And Carter delivered his speech between two major geopolitical disasters, right? The Iranian Revolution and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Just like here, the botched Afghanistan withdrawal and now the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Carter's approval rating had touched an all-time low of 28% in June of '79. He never got back above 40% as his campaign unfolded. And inflation, which had stood at 5.2% in the month where he was inaugurated, hit an all-time high of 14.6% in April of 1980, driven skyward by the surge in oil prices that followed the Iranian Revolution. So we are in a very familiar situation here. And frankly, Biden is really fortunate that in the press coverage he's been getting from the New York Times and the Washington Post, they've been quite forgiving of him, and they were much tougher of their coverage of Carter. But in my opinion, the press won't be enough to make up for this Carter 2.0 presidency.
It's a great comparison. And Harris, to me, his mission is two-pronged. Number one, have a sober leveling with the American people, acknowledge their pain. But number two, send a strong message to an autocratic leader, what we heard Jen Psaki say that he will do.
You're right about that. I mean, there are multiple audiences, right? All of those leaders south of the border are watching too. They want to see if he's going to make it a priority, because people are coming through their countries to try to get to this one. And it's trampling along the way our relationships that former President Trump was working on, but he did it through a different manner, right? Through trade policies and a little bit of strong arming too. So everybody's watching. One person who'll be watching closely will be the former ambassador of the United States, or the UN, to the UN, and that is Nikki Haley. And she was on with me today. And what she said about China was really quite chilling. She said it was clear that at Beijing, China and Russian leaders were, they were glad-handing. They were hanging out. And now China is upset with Russia because they've handled this so poorly. So they're now learning how to invade a country better than Russia did it. They're going to school on that. And what she said was, can you believe we're still depending on China to shore up Russia and for Russia to do a deal with Iran? Like, we can't get off our dependency on them. Here it is. Watch.
The idea that Biden would go ask China for help with Russia sickens me to my core. When you're going to one enemy to get help with another enemy, do you know how weak that looks? We've got to stop all of this embarrassment. At some point, learn the fact that when tyrants say they're going to do something, we should learn the lesson they're going to do it.
You know, it furthers the question, and I'd be curious to know what Rebecca thinks about this kind of on the world stage. Why can't Biden see who our enemies aren't and who our friends might be? Neither one of them is ever going to be a friend. So when you go to one and back channel with one about the other, they will always choose each other before they choose us. And that's what's happening.
That is exactly what's happening. And Rebecca, maybe you can address that point and also address Zelensky spoke to CNN. He said that he had a phone call with President Biden. He also said that tonight during the State of the Union, this is Zelensky saying this, President Biden needs to say something, quote, useful. What could Biden say that is, quote, useful?
Wow.
Well, I guess two points I would say. One, I agree with Harris about this identifying friends and enemies. I mean, this is foreign policy 101. Know who your friends are and then be a great friend to them. Yes. Shore up their defenses, do what is necessary, look at what they're asking for, listen to them. That's one of the failures of the Biden administration. They came in, he immediately started beating up on the Poles. The Saudis, who have internal problems, but they've been great partners in deterring Iran. And he went and was hard on the Saudis. And then he reached out to the Germans, which have been very problematic for the NATO alliance. And then, of course, he kind of downplayed all of these Russia threats, cyber attacks on the part of Russia against the United States, which signaled that he wasn't going to stand up to Russia. And that's why Putin got the idea that now is the time to actually invade Ukraine. So he does have all of these things backwards, and we need to have a president who gets that point right. That will affect so much for the United States.
And what should that message be tonight from Biden? What would be seen as strong in the eyes of Putin and useful in the eyes of Zelensky?
I mean, I think what he needs to say right now is that the United States is going to be energy independent. We are no longer going to pursue the Green New Deal stuff, not now. I know that's not what he's going to say. He's going to say the opposite of that. But that's going to demonstrate that the United States is serious about not declining as a major power, and that we are going to keep the military equipment, aids, medical equipment coming to Ukraine. As long as they're willing to fight their fight, we will continue to fund them and provide the necessary equipment that they need to carry out this fight.
Yeah, Joey, same question to you. What does Vladimir Putin need to hear?
Vladimir Putin needs to hear that he's not going to get away with this. But I'll take it a step back and say what Americans need to hear is an explanation from our president of why this war matters to our current government. We have a lot of viewers here at Fox especially that no longer trust anything the government says. And they're going to run in the wrong direction on this if they don't get good information. That's our responsibility, but it's also the responsibility of our president to lay out to Americans why we're helping Ukraine and why it's important to stifle Russians' attempted expansion.
Yeah, well, the stakes are high, and America will be watching. The world will tonight at 9 p.m.